Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. Here, this is the spot where the conversation is pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. Welcome home, Brains. There's only one requirement to hang out on the edge, is that you open your big brain and close your small mind. Did you bring your thinking caps? It's time to put them on, because the conversation starts now. Welcome to On the Edge with April Mahoney Brains. You are at the spot, the location, the place where the conversations are pointed, the guests are sharp, and the responses are never dull. And today we have John McEntire. I can't wait to talk to John. He is super smart and super heady, and he's traveled the world. He's guiding teams in unique ways to empower for continental cohesiveness and productive advancement. That's a lot of big words. In other words, he's going around the globe trying to have people work together in a productive manner. Okay. And I just want to hear something about his adventures, the work that he's doing. What does this look like in this landscape now with AI, with diversity, equity, and inclusion, with millennials only wanting to work from something this big? What does this look like to bring all this together in a cohesive manner to make it functional, but also create satisfaction and grow corporations? So let's welcome him to the edge. How are you, John?
I'm doing really good. Thanks, April, for inviting me.
Absolutely. I told you, you're looking like brand new money right there. Yes, you are. So before we get started, I always like to look in people's background. Tell me a little bit about that tapestry there that you have on the wall.
Well, that is from Afghanistan, but I bought it when I was working in Doha, Qatar. That's where the World Cup was last November. Anyway, it's an antique prayer rug, but it's actually the tree of life. And the tree of life, you have that in three different religions. Christianity, Islam, and also Judaism. And so it's a very important thing. I think the tree of life just signifies where we are. We have to grow roots, and then we have to grow ourselves, and then from that other people come. So that's why I have that.
Well, it's beautiful. It really is. It looks ancient. It looks worn in a beautiful kind of way that someone has really poured their heart out and opened themselves up to God on that. So you have a very valuable piece right there.
I think so.
Tell us
Thank
a
you.
little bit, John, about how you show up in the world and what is it that you do?
So how I show up in the world is that I help organizations and individuals become their best, and how they can work better together. I try to foster the ability to bring cultures and languages and thinking together. So when I talk about languages, I'm not just talking about an international language. Like I'm American, I speak English. My wife is Japanese, she speaks Japanese. I'm not talking just about those languages, but even the fact that in our families, we each have different ideas, ideals, things that we're going for. We have different things where we're speaking different lingo, especially in companies and organizations. You've got the finance people speak, finance lingo, and you've got the communications people that speak their own language. You've got the people who are technical who speak their own language, and somehow you need to get everybody on the same page so that they are speaking the same language and they're going after the same goals in the same manner.
Well, that's a lot of heavy lifting because, I mean, really, you just look at the landscape of the world right now. Forget corporations. As again, like you say, in your own household, they speak a different love language. You know,
Absolutely.
and so tapping into that reservoir because it's coming from all different angles. What do you do in? I know being a good listener is very important, but how do you go in and kind of assess where to begin with an organization? Because there's a lot going on.
Well, I have a little program called Sync. It's
Okay.
synchronize yourself naturally within your community. And basically, it's a methodology that focuses on these four main aspects. There's synchronize, which is emphasizing the importance of coordinating and aligning different elements to achieve a common goal or a desired outcome. So getting everybody on the same page. This is bridging gaps, building accord, creating consensus, and maintaining, a timely and continual continuity with the community. And the community can be your family, it can be your office, it can be your business, the corporation, it can be a government agency, it can be a school, a church. Think of community, whatever it is you're trying to bring together. Well, in order for that to all work, you have to work on yourself first. And so this is to personalize things. And this aspect focuses on personalizing and tailoring approaches to suit individual preferences, needs, and characteristics. It involves being authentic, having high integrity, being empathetic, kind, caring, and practicing what I like to focus on is servant leadership. And I think that's really, really key. The leaders need to actually be the ones that are the servants, and they're working their tails off to make sure that everybody else is taken care of. Well, you need to do this naturally, and that's naturalize. And this aspect emphasizes the importance of introducing or establishing foreign ideas. Okay, so this is that cultural aspect again, and approaches to the new environment. And it's allowing you to adapt and thrive in that narrative, in that location. So this involves being natural and integral and internalizing all these things. So this is stuff that I pull things from the different cultures that I've been able to associate with along the way. So you have from Korea, we have what's called nunchi, and this is the art of reading people and situations. I also bring out Sun Tzu, which is that military general from ancient China. And people will say, well, why do you want to have a military strategist, being somebody who would be followed? Well, he was actually a philosopher. And basically what he's saying is that, how do you make it so you don't have to battle to win the war? So really you're trying to learn how you win people's hearts and get your enemies to understand you and get your friends to align with you better. And so it's basically harmonized.
I just want to interject real quick. I dig dictators. I know people say, what? But no, really, I like how they're structured. I like how they are able to, I don't want to say manipulate, but in a lot of situations, manipulate, coerce, and encourage people to follow them in their beliefs. So even though I may not agree with what they're using that power for, not good, not evil, but that is still very, very valuable. And some of these things that you've mentioned are just, they're so futuristic because people are stuck, John. They're stuck right now. They're stuck in the old ways. I mean, look at our government. I'm not going political, but what does a 15 or 16-year-old want to talk to an 80-plus-year-old president about? They're not even on the same wavelength. They don't have this, and nobody wants to listen to the young people.
Absolutely.
We have artificial intelligence that is going to take over everything. People fight against but whether you fight against it or not, it's here and it's here to stay and it's growing. Absolutely. So how do we work and how do we incorporate that and all of these other wonderful things that you have into sync?
So we get to the last part of sync, which is the community or communitize. And this aspect is bringing people together, organizing the group into a community. So you need to have a sense of shared identity. So my really firm beliefs are, just innate beliefs are that everyone is here on this earth for a purpose. And it's basically everybody's responsibility to find out what that purpose is. But when it comes to leaders, they need to allow those people to work within their purpose. So you think about company executives, somebody who hires a new employee, well, oftentimes they try to have them fit in this box. Well, right. they need to understand that in order for that employee to actually be such a valuable piece of that puzzle, they need to be able to be themselves. And it's by being themselves that they're going to actually be able to flourish and make that puzzle piece that they have be the best it is and to make it fit the best inside the puzzle of the whole.
But also what they have to realize is that when you apply for a particular job and you go for that interview, you are an independent contributor to that new organization. You can't be the manager that you were at GM going to Ford. you have to also be able to be flexible. So I get the leadership and they get it, you know, they're working towards that. But what you bring to the table as an employee, so many people are enamored with this. I want to be an entrepreneur. Well, it's tough work. It's tough work. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
being a W 2 employee or being an hourly employee, there's a lot of great value in that. How do we support the workers? Use, for example, right now we've got this big kerfuffle going on with everybody's on strike, from healthcare to Hollywood to the car manufacturers. And then you've got the other group that are quietly quitting, or they are, um, you know, the great resignation. How do
Yeah.
we motivate the employees? I understand we're doing leadership, but how do we get people back engaged and make them excited about where they work?
Absolutely. So, going back to the Great Resignation, which you pointed out, I mean, think about this. In 2021 to 22, 50 million people, participated in the Great Resignation. They left their jobs because they weren't satisfied. They wanted to have something else that they could have control over, and they didn't like the way they were being treated. So why does that come about? Well, it comes about because there's some type of a divide that's happened in our society where we don't just have super rich anymore, we have uber rich.
Mm-hmm.
And though we have these multi billionaires, even 100 billionaire, and they definitely have provided value within the context of that idea and that company and everything. And so you don't want to diminish that, but the thing is they didn't get there by themselves.
Right.
And if they're actually able to pull their people along and get them to mesh with their vision even better, and also treat them appropriately, okay? And that doesn't mean that they need to have a big piece of the pie or not, but they need to feel like they are part of the puzzle and that they're being appreciated for what they're doing, because that appreciation and the titles that they have and the things that motivate them are the things that are going to keep them not only in their jobs, but actually keep them progressing and making that company even more valuable. But there
Right.
does need to be some type of a shared activity there, from the top down and the bottom up.
And I agree with you. Okay, but there's this new 25, I like to use this term, $25 term, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, as a Black woman in America, I don't want to be a head count. I want a seat at the table.
Sure,
And
absolutely.
that is where the value and the equity and the diversity and the inclusion really is with the decision makers. Same old people that have run it, same old way that they've been running it. No new identities. Like I said, you've traveled the world, multicultural. You have seen women more powerful than, we've got a women in power here. You don't hear from them. You don't see them. They're still kept in the shadows. You've been in countries, Africa, Asia, Indonesia, the Philippines. Women are running it. But now it seems like people are nervous. I don't know what is the trend that you're seeing as you travel across the world. Are women a lot more influential? Are they being respected more? Well, what are you seeing? Where do you see women in this space?
Well, of course, it varies by country and by culture. From my time in the Middle East, which was the most recent thing that I've been doing, that was for 9 years in Doha. I actually worked for the Qatar Foundation, and the Qatar Foundation's chairperson was Sheikha Mosa. Sheikha Mosa is just an astounding woman leader. She is just fabulous, and that's because of her and her husband, who is the father Emir. He abdicated the throne to his son because he thought that the younger people should have more control over the country, and so he got out of the limelight, but his wife is still in the limelight, and she has empowered women in that country, but also within the region. And so the Arab region looks to her as a beacon of success and a beacon of progress. And she's really tried to make it so that everybody feels good. So I would say that partly because of her, Saudi Arabia, which is next door, has always been ultra conservative on the Islamic front, and they didn't allow women to drive until just a couple years ago.
Yeah, I was just thinking that too. I was like, wow.
Yeah. So I would say that they have allowed women to drive. I actually have a really good friend who's an attorney who went from Doha into Saudi Arabia, and she was actually in there in the mix while they were going through all these changes. And so they didn't have to wear the burqa anymore. They didn't have to. They can drive. They can work wherever they want, and there's lots of inclusion there. So I've seen these things take place in Doha in Qatar. That they were already doing that type of thing, and so that was really nice to see that. But the other part of
But you know
the
what's sad in a way? That here we are in the 21st, 22nd century, and just now. So the suppression and the oppression is also traumatizing. You know,
and
so
I
you
and I would
gotta
say
you gotta get it, you gotta get adjusted.
yeah, and I would say that that trauma is also accentuated by the fact that we had COVID, which really put everybody off kilter, and we're still trying to come back to steam from that. So, um,
What did
one of
that
the
teach you, John?
what did
In that moment of silence during COVID, what did that teach you?
well, it taught me.
You laugh.
Well, the reason why I laugh is because it taught me how important the stuff that I'm trying to bring out, the stuff that I'm trying to mentor people on, is so needed. Um, because when you have COVID and you had all these governmental people, and it seemed like you had the governments and you had the pharmaceutical companies and a lot of people kind of teaming up against the regular people, and they were forcing things down people's throats. And what I feel is that um, there was probably a lot of different ways they could have done that better. I don't think that you should ever force anybody to do anything.
No.
Now, you talked about dictators and everything. I think a dictator going to a point where people are getting fired and stuff for not doing something,
Right.
but not having the reason, the carrot that allows them to really try and do that, beforehand. But it's just a hand slap. It makes it difficult.
It's the fight or flight. It's the fear.
Absolutely.
And everybody was fearful, and they just didn't know what to do. Now there was a plan put in place, but others decided to disband that. I'm not saying that was a perfect plan, but at least there was a template to work against. And I think people just got so full of themselves, that it just went rogue. And then parents didn't know who these little people were until they had to try to homeschool them.
Yeah.
I found that amazing. And you being a father of 6, I'm sure that you saw some things and said, wow, this is a different kind of math than what I did when I was in school. All these things really set a new precedent for the future. When you look at what you're doing and your travels and your experience, what are some of the successes that you can lend to your portfolio? What are some of the things that you have been a part of that has really made an integral change?
So I've talked a lot about being in Doha, Qatar. So at my job in my career has been in technology transfer. So basically, what I do is I work for research universities. I take that cutting edge science, which comes out of the research from the research inventors. I determine if it's patentable, if it's something marketable, and if it's something that we should invest in with patents and marketing and to create startup companies and things like that. I went to the Middle East where intellectual property is what we're talking about. So patents and copyrights and trademarks and things. Right. Those things were just not known, and research had only started a couple years before at on a national level with Qatar Foundation, and so I needed to go in there and we started this technology transfer office. Our first thing was to actually put together a policy to help people understand what intellectual property was and how we work with it. And so that meant that we needed to get people around the table to determine what this policy was going to say. And there were some things that went on in that course that were good, and there's some things that were not so good. And I learned from that activity. And then we redid that intellectual property policy 6 years later, and it was a very different environment and everything. But basically, getting everybody on the same page. So this is the people from, the administrators, the research inventors, the people that are leading the organizations, making sure that everybody's on the same page. And then you got your attorneys and your finance people who have to fund these types of activities, and pretty much trying to get them on the same page. And so, although everything's not perfect, and as people change in these organizations, the puzzle pieces get moved and everything. But for the most part, we were able to get people to understand the importance of intellectual property, getting people on the same page. From that activity, I was able to, license technologies out to create 7 startup companies. Wow. And then there was 40 other technologies that I licensed out to existing companies. And basically, that's in an organization where the technology is like really, really nascent. Most organizations where I've worked before, like the University of Illinois or the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, they've had decades of experience with technologies. Right. And so they had a lot of technologies which were really, really, already solid, and they were ready to go. And so we had to actually implement policies and processes and funding activities to actually get those inventions that were created to a better state so that they could be marketable. And so that's an activity, yes.
Yeah, but that makes them a lot more competitive and marketable on the world stage, because we have to talk globally now.
Absolutely.
We're global citizens, and it can't just be the United States. Because in my opinion, I'm speaking about me, we are no longer the leaders. We're not seen as the leaders. Our dollar is not as strong. We invent something, another country comes in and takes the intellectual property and reproduces it and makes it better. And so there's a challenge. But what do you think, dialing back a little bit to millennials and the youth, you see such a depletion in the education, test scores, their mental health, always in the device, being, taught by 30-second blurbs on TikTok. And then you see the Asian children and children in India. How can we re-engage and excite our children to be, innovators, inventors, scientists, mathematicians? A lot of girls are going into STEM, but how do we get them engaged again and not so just, it's like they're numb?
So this last year, I participated with Jack Canfield and received my Success Principles coaching, methodology coaching certificate. And, the number one thing in there is to be 100% responsible. So we need to get people to recognize that they're only a victim if they allow themselves to be a victim. Right. What we need to be is a victor. And the only way we can be a victor is to actually be, in charge of our lives and take that 100% responsibility. So, one thing that happens in Japan that, doesn't happen often in other places very much, and that is that the school children, they're at school and of course they're learning their STEM, courses and everything, but they're also responsible for their daily activities. They have to clean the school, the classrooms, the hallways every day. They're ones that are serving the lunches in their rooms to each other. They actually, it's that servant leadership that they're learning from the onset. And I think that if we're able to instill some of those types of activities in them, that would be really good. So I look back at my life. I've been working since I was 11. And
I've had my own business since I was 5.
Yeah, and see, we could do that back then, but there's a lot of laws and rules that don't even allow kids to work right now. And so we've got institutions that are standing in the way of that.
right, but there's a lot of parents too that are coddling and hand holding.
Well,
You
and
know,
I
there was a generation there. Now, of course, we want to make it better for our kids. What parent doesn't want their child to exceed what they have done? I get that. But holding their feet to the fire and making them accountable, that doesn't mean corporal punishment. But there has to be, again, a sense of community, volunteer work, make your bed up. That was one of my
absolutely.
basic fundamentals. When you get out of that bed, you make it up for so many reasons. That's a place that you rest, you make love, you recover when you sleep, you relax. Your bed is something very, very important, and it should be maintained. That take the garbage out. Do I have to tell you to take the garbage out? You know, or like my daughter, she wasn't able to move out until she was 28.
Mm,
That magical number of 18 doesn't exist anymore. The cost
no,
of
it
living,
doesn't.
you know, going to college, you know, today, unfortunately, there was another mass shooting. There's too much distraction to keep them focused, and it breaks my heart because there are so many bright, talented, individuals and the teachers and people like you that dedicate your life to pour into these individuals. I just don't know where we're headed.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, especially on the youth side. The youth that are out here today, they are amazing. They have so much innate talent, so
Yeah.
much pent up energy that somehow we need to be able to help them release that. But they
Yes.
need to feel like they're accepted. They need to feel like they're appreciated to be able to do that. And so as a society, we need to be able to, um, reach across the aisle, okay, of these different things that are going on in our lives and bring people towards a similar goal. And I there's a story I'd like to tell you,
Yes.
which is one of the reasons why the US is so prominent in regards to being an innovative country. And I'm worried that we're kind of losing that. But in the 1970s, the US was spending billions of dollars on research. And when it came to the universities and the research organizations that the funding was going to, there wasn't very much impact coming out of this. So, why was the reason for that? Well, it's because the government owned everything. So everything went back to the government and it sat on shelves. It's kind of like the Indiana Jones movie where you have the big warehouse and all those shelves with all those things on it. So nothing was getting out. So in 1980, Birch Bayh, a Democrat, and Bob Dole, a Republican, they said, hey, we got to fix this. And this has got to be a bipartisan activity. So they reached across the aisle and they created what was called the Bayh-Dole Act. Well, the Bayh-Dole Act is why I have my job. That's what is tech transfer. But that's also what made the U.S. become, the engine that it is for innovation. So, what is the most remarkable invention that came from that, or the most maybe notable, or people seeing what it is? It's Google. Google came out of this activity. Okay,
Right.
Google came from Stanford, and Google's a 1.5 billion-dollar company or trillion-dollar company. So it is actually the value of the 10th GDP of the world, which is Korea. So when I went to Japan, and I speak Japanese, and I worked in Japan for 7 years, and I was asked to come back to Japan when I was in this transfer mode, when I was at the University of Illinois, and help them put together their Bayh-Dole Act equivalent for Japan, and to put together a technology transfer office for the region. Well, there's 18 countries that have done and have mimicked the US in this type of activity. But you know what's happening is that our politics are pulling this thing apart. They're pulling this jewel apart, and there are people that are wanting to get rid of this. Well, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You may have to tweak things, but you don't take something that was really good, that the world is seen as really good and is mimicking,
Right.
and throw it out. You need to work with it. So what we were missing right now is that reaching across the aisle and saying, hey, we got problems, let's work them out. And I would say that the 70s, working into the 80s, was pretty intense too. Maybe not as bad as it is right now, but still there was a lot of fervor on each side of the aisle. And so what Senators Bayh and Dole did was actually amazing. And we need to have more of that type of activity actually take place in our world. And then that becomes an example for us to be working in our regular lives. And so
Just
people,
civility. Just some, I'm worried about democracy. And
absolutely.
you, like me, have traveled to communist countries. But I'll tell you, back to that dictator stuff. Now, Brains, I'm not a communist. Before you get off on a tangent, but when I went to China, there was law and order. There was It was beautiful. It was clean. People reserved. It was a lot of competition because there's a lot of people. There was a lot of competition, but they did something that just really warmed my heart. So we're driving, and they bumped their horn. So many people on their bicycles and the ducks and all this crossing the street. But when they did that, they would wave at you. And I asked my driver, and I said, "Well, what is that all about?" He says, "Because you have avoided a conflict, that you didn't hit my bike, that you didn't run over my duck, that you didn't run over me. Maybe I was distracted at the time." They were so civil. They were so kind to one another. Now they looked at me from head to toe as if I was like this alien, you know, but in the end, it was more of a curiosity and not a judgment.
Absolutely.
It was like, let me see. I loved that. Now, all regimes are not the same. I don't know if it'd be the same in Cuba. I don't know if it'd be the same in Russia, how they would treat people. But the Chinese and their philosophy, to me, they get a bad rap.
Mhm.
They get a bad rap. And the culture and how they treat a family, community, but responsibility. And they teach that from the time you can pick up your chopsticks. You learn that you are a part of this community and that you have to continue to let this engine run. So I love that. But here in the United States, we're just a mosh posh of madness now. Everybody's jockeying for a position. Now, there's still a lot of good things in America. Don't get me wrong. I love being an American. But when I look at people that come from other countries that, come over here as immigrants and they work hard, the first thing they do is they start a business. The first thing they do is, they don't come over here necessarily as people think to get on welfare and to, do this. They're coming because they want to up level their life. They want their children to go to school. They want decent health care, just like anybody else. And
And
it's just,
they're willing to get their hands dirty and work for it.
I'm telling you, I don't know where half these people are. I just had some construction work done on my house. John, it was 7 bids before I could find people to do it. And they weren't, they were two nice Cuban men. And let me tell you, they worked their tail off. My house is magnificent. I didn't have
Absolutely
to ask
great.
them nothing. I didn't have to, they had a work ethic. They had a work ethic. And now technology has tweaked the brains of so many that, the brick and mortar, getting your hands dirty, being a plumber, being an electrician is now sloppy seconds when they're still very viable. And then you look at artificial intelligence. Now you're on the tech side. I want you to pour into that with me. And I'm going to invite you back to be on another interview with my mentor, who is, she is just engulfed in this AI. I don't use it as much, but it's taking on so many forms. How are we able to incorporate that and not be afraid of it? A lot of people are afraid of it.
Well, I think people should be afraid of it if they don't actually get their hands dirty and use it. Okay, so what's really important is to in an AI world, you need to look at where you stand in that environment and what needs to happen for that job to be successful, and look at what AI can do to enhance that job, which could be scary because it could take the job away. But because that aspect is scary, you shouldn't, be an ostrich and put your head in the sand. You need to be actually wide open, thinking about how do I utilize this to make me the best I can be. So when you're talking about AI, I use it daily. And what am I using it for? I'm using it to do research. I'm using it to help wordsmith things that I'm trying to put out there as a post or whatnot. I'm as a script. I'm trying to augment things. So what's really crucial with the AI aspect is that you as a person, again, going back to that personalize, you need to make yourself as unique and authentic as possible. And it's through that authenticity that and your integrity that you're going to pull together, that creativity. So being creative and being empathetic is something that AI is not good at. And so that's the things that we need to get our younger people and just the world in general to actually focus on. So the menial tasks, will hopefully, go away so that we can all be working on more interesting things and things that actually are more meaningful. And it's our personality going into that, which makes that AI augment that to make it something that actually reaches more audiences.
So now you've traveled around the world. You just came from Qatar. You've been to, Asia. You've been to India.
I haven't been to India. I have not been to India, but I've worked when I was in Doha. I worked with people from 65 different countries.
Hmm. And so,
Okay.
how are they looking at AI?
Well, so one of the things that I'm still working on in Doha is I'm working with a group that actually it's TASMU. It's a TASMU project, which is a government project, which is focused on data and AI. And I help entrepreneurs fill in the holes, bridge the gaps in regards to who they need to be talking to, who they're like, how they make themselves different from what's going on out there, how do they do stuff in DEI, in regards to that, how do they make it so that their organization, the things that they're working on, actually can be something not only beneficial but actually something that pokes their head up above the others. And so that's what I'm doing as a mentor for those people in those groups.
Wow. Well, you are really on the cutting edge, and I am so uh, flattered that you're here on the edge with my brains to really tell them, what's going on in the world, how they can be impactful, insightful, as well as competitive, because it is a competitive space. Let's not kid ourselves when it comes to that. But how can we still be leaders in our homes, in our communities, in our corporations, in our schools, in our society, our community, everything. So, John, you are just wonderful. And again, like I said, I can't wait to invite you back to really
Well,
have a conversation with Brigitte, because it's going to be off the charts. She's a brain too.
so I really appreciate the opportunity to be in this venue because it's really important for us to branch out into different audiences. And so, I'm able to talk with your brains, and I'm really grateful for that because each group has their own way of looking at things and looking at the world. But what you're doing is you're bringing all these different interesting concepts together, and what a service you're doing for your brain group, your brainiacs.
I'm just really trying to raise their consciousness.
Hmm.
I do some work here with at the Deepak Chopra Center, and it's not about mindset anymore. It's about being woke. It's about being awakened. It's about the present moment more so than anything. I believe that we're in this lunar vortex. We're in this portal, and spirituality is going to get us there. You're not going to be able to take your diamond rings or your $1 trillion to the next place. You are going to ascend somewhere. And so let's just hope and pray that you are conscious, that you are woke, that you're living your best life. Please tell us if there's any groups, organizations that you are, promoting, if you have an online webinar that people can tap into, follow you on social media. Please, how do they reach out to you, John?
So I am on social media. I'm on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Instagram, um, not on Twitter or X yet. I'm working on that. Uh, I am both on those with my company and my individually. And I have my website is Mutual Prosperity, all one word, mutualprosperity.com. So www.mutualprosperity.com. And they can find out about my sync program and all the different activities that I'm doing in regards to this space.
Well, I appreciate that, and I can't wait to follow you and just get heady. Just listening to you, I feel smarter.
Well, the same thing goes back to you too. I really appreciate it. Um,
That's what we're lacking now is, conversation.
Absolutely,
and
absolutely.
giving and giving the person an opportunity to explain it and go deeper instead of being so combative and resistant. Don't do it, brains. I'm telling you, you're fighting against the wind and you won't win.
Well, if you're, if people, if as people, if we just go down a path because our group or our color is doing that pathway, I think we need to look back and say, what do I as an individual think, and what is my intuition telling me is right or wrong? And if we follow that, that's actually going to take us to where we need to be personally, which helps us create that piece of the puzzle, which goes into those groups that we're going in, and to make that those groups work better. So again, everybody's here for a reason. We need to figure out what that reason is individually. We need, as the leaders, need to allow those people to flourish in that space and appreciate them for the work that they're doing. And then we can congeal and everybody can work together, being on the same page for the same mission. And we're going to go tremendous places. And our youth are going to go wild because of this, because they're just going to grow, and they're going to get out of the slump that they're in right now. And they're going to feel like they're really productive and doing something meaningful for society.
Well, if you know what I say, get rid of everybody that's already in those positions, from the White House to,
Well,
get in some fresh blood. I
well,
take a chance. I take a chance on some fresh blood. Yeah, they sometimes, we've had some that are kind of combative, but they're trying to find their way, and it is a different path that they're taking. And I say, get rid of all up and get all brand new.
well, if you think about the founding fathers, I think they were very inspired in regards to the Constitution and the way the country was built. And we're not working the way the country was built. What they meant to do was that people would step in, and they would take a leadership role for a short period of time, but they weren't supposed to be making a living off of this. This wasn't supposed to be their livelihood for 40 or 50 years. They were supposed to get in, do their job, do their service, provide, their leadership for a time, and then they're supposed to pass the baton to the next generation. And we've missed several generations because of what's going on right now, and that's not good. And that's where people are feeling like they're misrepresented, and they're not able to actually feel like they're part of the fabric.
Right, right. Well, you know what? I say vote for John. It's so important. Thank you so much for being here on the Edge. Brains, did you hear what we just talked about? It was heavy. You needed a crane for that, okay, to pick it up. But think about it. Go back and re-listen to it 2 or 3 times. Share with a friend. This is very valuable, important information. This is a love language. We're loving on you. We want you to be smart. We want you to be happy. We want you to be healthy. We want you to explore your options. We want you to be good to your community and to your kids. Be good to yourself. And the only way that you can do that is raise your level of consciousness and awareness. Thank you so much for being here with me, John McEntire. I have enjoyed this so much. You are the best.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Brains, for letting me talk this way.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon.
Goodbye.